unfold.
All right, let's go on a bit of an odyssey today. But we're not talking about outer space. No, we're talking about the inner cosmos, the one right inside your gut. It's often called our second brain, and believe me, it secretly runs a whole lot more of our lives than we ever imagined. So let's dive right in. Okay, so you've probably heard that classic science fact, right? That we're basically just walking containers for bacteria, that they outnumber our own cells by a huge margin. It's a really powerful image, but is it actually true? Well, the real answer, as it turns out, is way more fascinating. So for decades, the number that got thrown around was 10 to 1. 10 bacterial cells for every one of our own. But, turns out, that was a myth. Newer, more careful science has completely upended that. The real number is much, much closer to 1 to 1. We're talking about 38 trillion bacteria and 30 trillion human cells. See, it's not an occupation, it's a partnership. And honestly, that makes the whole connection even more profound. So, if we're not just a pile of human cells, what are we? Well, scientists have a really cool word for this, a holobiont. And what that means is that you, yes, you, are not a single individual. You're actually a walking, talking ecosystem, a superorganism, made up of your human self and trillions of microbial partners. And this partnership, it's not passive at all. In fact, your gut has an intelligence that's so incredibly complex that scientists literally call it our second brain. So let's start by looking at the hardware, the physical connection. 500 million. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's how many neurons are in your gut's own nervous system, the enteric nervous system. I mean, to put that in perspective, that is 5 times more neurons than you have in your entire spinal cord. This thing is so complex, it can actually operate completely on its own, without any input from the brain in your head. Wild, right? You know, for the longest time, we thought the gut's conversation with the brain was, well, slow, like sending a letter through the mail via hormones in the bloodstream. But then a totally revolutionary discovery changed everything. Scientists found these special neuropod cells, and get this, they form a direct, hardwired connection, a synapse, straight to the brain. The communication went from taking minutes to taking milliseconds. We're talking instant. This is the actual biological hardware behind what we call a gut feeling. Okay, so just how smart are these neuropod cells? Well, they can literally taste the food you're eating. I'm not kidding. They can tell the difference between real sugar and an artificial sweetener. When you have real sugar, boom, a signal zips up to your brain's reward centers. But with fake sugar, nothing. So think about that next time you have a craving. It might not be coming from your tongue, but from the super intelligent lining of your... Okay, so we've established this instant hardwired connection. We know how they're talking. But the next big question is, what are they actually saying? Let's try to decode the chemical language that our microbes are speaking. Now, here's a fact that absolutely blows my mind every time I hear it. Let's talk about serotonin. You know, the famous happy chemical. You'd think it's a brain chemical, right? Nope. A staggering 95% of your body's serotonin is made and used right there in your gut. But, and this is a huge but, here's the twist. In the gut, it's not about mood. It's a workhorse molecule that's busy regulating digestion. The serotonin in your gut basically stays in your gut. So if it's not serotonin, what is the real chemical language between your gut and your brain? Well, it's these things called short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs for short. When your gut bacteria munch on the fiber you eat, they produce these incredible little compounds, and these are the real signals. These are the molecules that influence everything from inflammation and metabolism all the way up to brain health itself. Now, this whole intricate system is incredibly powerful, but it's also fragile. And in our modern world, this inner ecosystem is facing something that some scientists are calling nothing short of a mass extinction event. And the contrast is just stark. If you look at the Hadza people in Tanzania, who live a traditional hunter-gatherer lifestyle, their gut ecosystems are just teeming with diversity. It's incredible. Then you look at the modern Western gut, and by comparison, we've lost huge amounts of that diversity. And this isn't just an interesting fact. This loss is being directly linked to the rise of so many modern inflammatory diseases. And the consequences of this crisis, they aren't just physical. The connection to our mental health is so strong, it leads to a really startling question. Could something like depression actually be contagious? So a landmark study decided to test this exact question. What they did was they transplanted microbes from humans with major depression into healthy, microbe-free rats. The result was absolutely shocking. The rats started to show behaviors linked to depression and anxiety. Think about that. The depressive state was literally transferred through the microbiome alone. This was powerful causal evidence that our gut health can directly impact our mental health. And the connection doesn't even stop there. Now, new research is pointing to a new suspect in Alzheimer's disease. The thinking is that certain gut microbes can actually produce these damaging proteins, like amyloid. And if the gut lining becomes permeable, what people call a leaky gut, these proteins can get out, trigger inflammation all over the body, and potentially speed up the disease's progression in the brain. Okay, I know this all sounds pretty grim, but here's the hopeful part. The really good news. Because this ecosystem can be damaged, it means it can also be restored. And what's amazing is how ancient wisdom and cutting-edge modern medicine are coming together to do just that. I mean, microbiome therapy feels so cutting edge, right? But its roots go way, way back, all the way to 4th century China, where a physician prescribed something called yellow soup for really bad gut problems. Now, let's fast forward to April 2023. The US FDA approved a pill called VOWST. It's the first oral pill for fecal microbiota transplantation. It is literally the same core idea, just refined into a modern, safe medicine. And here is the actual quote from that ancient medical text. Yeah, it's pretty raw and direct, I'll give it that. But the crazy thing is, it worked. It's just an incredible example of an ancient observation now being totally validated by modern science. And all of this is leading us to this incredibly exciting new frontier called psychobiotics. This is the idea of using specific, targeted bacteria as a treatment for mental health. We're talking about particular probiotic strains that, in clinical trials, have been shown to actually reduce anxiety and depression. I mean, this could be a whole new pillar of mental health care in the future. So after this whole journey through our inner cosmos, it really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? We aren't just individuals, we are ecosystems. And once you see yourself that way, it totally changes the fundamental question of health. It shifts from how do I fix myself to how do I care for the trillions of partners that make me who I am. So the final question for you is this. If you are an ecosystem, are you being a good steward